It won't be 20 minutes, though. There's never been a time when I've been more desperate to get a message out than I am today. To tell you my dad was a great guy, that would have just embarrassed him. No. Because there was magic in his relationship with his family, and I want to tell you all about that. And more than any other attributes he had that were considerable, his intellect, his patience, his wit, his charm, the most formative, important one of all was love. That was the one that really transformed, that really formed us, that made us. And I will tell you, if you've ever been impressed by Catherine, my mom, the grandkids, any of us, more than you realize, you felt the impact of Ron Bourne. More than you realize, you felt the impact, that most cliched of all things, unconditional love. And I can hear the doubtful voices in some of your head. Well, I've been impressed with you, Joe, but it was because you were smart and hardworking and got things done. You were competent. I'm sure you were loved. I'm sure it was a great comfort, but that's not really what impressed me. Well, let's talk about that for a minute. Let's start with intelligence. So there's a theory all humans have about the same size brain, same number of neurons, and what defines aptitude is how we apply those different neurons. We know some people are creative, some people are analytical, some people are quantitative, some people left brain, right brain, and so on. And the same theory kind of posits that geniuses are so because they've essentially put all their eggs in one basket. And they have great heights, but they've also robbed from other areas where they're very incompetent. I have no idea if that theory is true, but I can certainly say for me, anyone who's worked with me knows, yes, I'm very good at a few things, and I'm colossally, breathtakingly bad at the vast greater number of things. We have to work around those. It's not just specific to me, but this is certainly true of the whole family. See that in Catherine and the grandkids, Lily and Lon are so brilliant in some areas, the next day you're like, oh my God, is this the same kid? How could this be? And Simon is like an exaggeration of me. All the things I was bad at, he manages to be a little bit worse. And then all the things I'm good at, he's breathtakingly better. You think about logic and numbers and the way he sees machines, the intuition, it's really just breathtaking. So are we brilliant or are we nincompoops? Well, the very unsatisfying answer is, it depends. It depends what you're measuring on. Say, okay, great, but what does that have to do with Ron Bourne? Well, I'll tell you. When you feel loved, you feel valuable. And when you feel valuable, you can detach yourself from your shortcomings. You don't have to be attached to fix them because, it is no reflection of you, and you know that. And that allows you to bounce between things until you find where your gifts lie. And that's what my dad did for me. If you've ever seen me and you feel I'm competent, it's because my dad gave me the confidence to bounce around until I found the thing that I really was good at and avoid the ones that I'm not. Okay, and then there's the diligence piece. Well, you might think, geez, unconditional love is going to make you complacent, but it turns out it doesn't work that way. As Lily often says, I would rather be yelled at than disappoint someone. That's a common sentiment, but it tells us what a powerful motivator love is. It doesn't make you complacent. It makes you want to earn and do something with that love. And then there's one other crucial piece, fearlessness. It's related. So Winston Churchill says that success is about moving from one failure to another without losing enthusiasm. Well, I can remember on my own moving from one failure to another. I'd come home, and Dad, in response to my despair, would look over his newspaper and say, well, you probably will fail. A lot. He said, what you're trying to do is incredibly hard, and that's why so few people choose to do it. This may not sound like the greatest motivational speech you ever heard, but in fact, it really was. And the reason it was is because, his love really shone through. This was a guy who didn't have to say, of course it has no bearing on your self-worth. To a guy like him, it was inconceivable you'd ever ask that question, why these failures weren't even of any consequence at all. And so in doing that, we have this howling monster of failure that so terrorized you down to the core of your self-worth, and my dad has so effortlessly defanged it and sent it off into the corner whimpering. Am I fearless? Am I diligent? Of course I am. Who wouldn't be? If you just watch your old man take the demon of doubt and just cast it off with a flick of his wrist, who's not going to be fearless? And that's just what my dad did for me when it comes to how I seem smart or how I seem hardworking. Of course, it's self-evident that, unconditional love is going to make you more patient, able to connect with people, more empathetic. So, I emerged from 48 years on the tutelage of one of the greatest teachers of love that I could ever imagine. And it's so I have so much urgency today because not only was this his greatest gift, but it's teachable. Of course, I know that because he taught me. And so I have these sea scrolls, these magic things. And at this moment, Friends and family are gathered around. The power of his spirit is at its absolute highest. Your hearts, your ears are the most open. So I'm going to run down into that cavern. I'm going to find the papyrus scrolls. I'm going to read these magic words. And I race up from the cavern, and I read them, and I bring it out, and I realize the air is oxidized, and they turn to ashes and scraps. What happened? Well, I've been rehearsing this speech for probably 10 years, knowing this moment would come, and each single time I get the same result. Because it turns out that unconditional love is not translated with words, no matter how poetic or articulate or how you worked on it. It's translated by these simple, diligent, consistent actions that he was so expert at doing. But the message is so precious and so central that I hope you'll indulge me for a few minutes. I give you these scraps. 6 lessons of fatherhood that I've learned from Ron Bourne. Number 1, play the long game. Joe, I care a lot more what you think about me at 35 than I do at 10 or 13 or 17. Yeah, thanks, Dad, that's great. But I wasn't the audience at those age. Maybe you are. But most of all, he was. Because it was a reminder to him, this is a long game. You don't judge it at 10 or 12 or 13 years old. And at 18, I really put him to the test. We're off, they're delivering me to University of Texas. And they would not buy me not a car. They were happy to buy me a car. They would not buy me the fancy, showy sports car that was thoroughly impractical I wanted. And for that offense, I was not speaking to them. I was not speaking to my parents. So we took this sleeper car down to Texas and weren't saying a word. And they were heartbroken. They were really hurt. But, I think deep down my dad knew I just wasn't ready to be the man that I ultimately would be. He let it go. And a couple years later, I was back up in Chicago, and I called the insurance agent, guy Con. Never met him, and I'll never forget this. I said, "Hi, I'm Joe Bourne. I'm Ron Bourne's son." And at the moment I said that, it occurred to me, this guy is going to be favorably predisposed to me. Maybe my folks weren't the dumb country rubes that I thought. Maybe there's real value in honesty and being a decent person. And it was that moment that arc started to turn, and I was becoming the man that my dad had hoped that I would be. When I turned 35, I wrote him a letter, a long letter. I said, "Dad, you've always wondered what I would think of you at 35, and I'm going to tell you." It was a long letter thanking him for being the man that he was, and being the father to me that he was. 2, love, hugs and kisses. Say I love you, a lot. It's not that your kids will really react and say, yeah, thanks, Dad, but what it is 2 things. One is these are the little emotional coins that go in your kid's piggy bank. And some dark day, we all know what's going to happen. Those kids are going to need to crack open that piggy bank, and that's going to get them on that Greyhound bus out of danger back home. Won't be pretty, but it's enough. And the second reason is it's training for you. It's just like a pitcher who pitches and pitches until it becomes muscle memory. You say, "I love you," you say, "I love you," it becomes automatic. And then that big day when they really need it, you'll be there. Hugs are very similar. Maybe you're not a hugger. You know what? Me neither. My dad would always "That's the price you pay for being loved," as I'd kind of recoil as a kid. The same way, 2 reasons. These are a little different, though. One is this causation's kind of funny. Andy always says, "Smile and you'll be happier." It works, just for a minute. Well, same way. Hug and you'll feel affection. You'll feel more affection, whether you mean to or not. And then again, it's training. Here's my dad on his deathbed, and I embraced him. I held him. And it's one of my most precious memories. As a grown man, one of my final memories is being held in my dad's embrace. That didn't happen because I decided it was a good idea. It happened because of all those years it had become automatic. That's what you got to do. 3, love first, ask questions later. They say that our kids most need our love when they deserve it least. And that was certainly true for us. I remember one time this tearful admission, telling him what had happened, this horrible life-changing thing. And before I can even get it out, Dad cuts me off. "We love you." Yeah, there was time to get into the details, but at that moment, that was exactly what I needed to hear, and it was there because it was so automatic to him. 4, be a black sheep. My dad was axiomatic in our household, and my dad was a black sheep of the family. I was off playing in saloons and piano when your cousins were all wearing neckties and getting real jobs, he'd say. And as I started to put this down, I wondered, was it even really true? Yeah, he played saloons. It wasn't very long. But the point of that whole story they would repeat very often was it gave us freedom. It gave the freedom to make mistakes, to do things, and to find ourselves. 5, let them find their answers on their own. This is the most cliched of all, but I'll tell you a story. I never once got a 3.0 in high school. I'm not saying I didn't get a B. I'm saying that I never got enough A's to offset the C's and D's to bring myself, we call it the white honor roll, to never once get on the white honor roll. Of course, this was great aggravation to my folks, and then, semester after semester, they'd be like, what happened? And, who knows? I mean, part of it was that there was so much socialization. I'm surrounded by great friends, many of which I might not have. I hadn't spent that much time socializing, getting to know them. But you can't help but wonder, what if I had really applied myself and gone to Stanford or MIT? Would it have been any different? Who knows? History doesn't reveal its alternatives. But here's the thing. Some many years later, my Aunt Rosalie came up, who was huge on education, and she said, I was so mad at your parents for not pushing you. With your aptitude and skill, you should have gone Ivy League. I remember laughing. I laughed out loud. Not that it never occurred to me I could have worked harder. It had never occurred to me that my parents were responsible for that. All my life, my decisions, good, bad, indifferent, what I have is me. This is my life, and I cannot tell you what an enormous gift it is. Sure, I wish my grades had been a little better, but I wouldn't trade that in a million years for believing this was my life. And number 6, find the hero. I don't know where my dad did it, but I had a friend who said, I was at my dad's funeral, and I learned for the first time how proud my dad was of me, because he had told his friends, who then told him at his funeral. Don't wait. I cannot tell you how many times, as a grown man, my dad would find the moment when I found myself, least valuable, and he'd come up behind me and say, you're my hero. And to the day I died, to the day he left, it would always make my hair and my neck stand on edge. It was so central. And I probably never acknowledged it. I probably never said, thanks, Dad, but I felt it. I felt it so deeply. And that was the thing that got me through in so many of these cases. So, that's it. Perhaps like some scene out of Sherlock Holmes movie, you can take these little pieces and assemble it and find some of the magic around born for your own homes. All right, closing. And Dad always said, Catherine too, that Mom's words are the most succinct, and I think he's right. So let me close with those. In the last moments of his life, my mom embraced my dad, and she had one final thing to say. She didn't express any regrets for the things that were unsaid or undone. She didn't say, why is me? She didn't plead for more time. What she said, and I'll try to be as true as I can to your exact words, she said, Ronnie, all those years ago, I was single, I was free, I had this career, and I was so scared of jumping into a family so abruptly with you. I said, oh boy, you were quite a salesman. You promised me the moon and the stars. She said, you promised me the moon and the stars. You promised me this rich life. You promised me all the love and the warmth, the adventure of a family. She paused. She said, I cannot imagine how you could have delivered more completely on that promise. Thank you. And if that does not define a successful life, then I don't know what does. Thank you, Dad.